Do you have a spiritual practice? Do you consider yourself a spiritual being? Do you have a guru? Do you follow a teacher? The last years that I have been personally studying and also teaching yoga, philosophy, meditation, tantra, I have been connecting with people who take their spiritual practice very serious. But also some people that think that anything that has to do with the word spiritual is totally and absolutely BS. You think people will know what BS means? I just learned it like 2 months ago. So the question is, what spirituality really means? What spiritual path should we take? Should we follow any teacher or any guru? What is a teacher? What is the guru? How to find one? And ultimately, what is all of this about? What is the ultimate truth of the universe? So to answer these questions, my friends, I reach out my friend Vishuddha Das. Vishuddha is a spiritual educator, is a spiritual teacher, is an author, has been studying and writing books of Vedanta. He is a spiritual badass. But yeah, the first time I saw Vishuddha was like, what these guys on his 20 with dreadlocks and barefoot, I don't really know if he's barefoot, has to teach me. But seriously, his content is just amazing. I personally was very judgmental at the beginning, very judgmental, like I am a very judgmental person. People judge a lot. You probably are judging me because of this weird video. But the quality of his content, the things that he addressed and the way that he shared it is just really on point. Yeah, no wonder why Vishuddha has more like 500,000 YouTube followers. So I just talked with Vishuddha, I asked him all these questions, I record this conversation. The conversation is now here available for you. What spirituality really means, should you follow a guru or not, what is the ultimate truth of the universe, all these questions answered in a very grounded way, in a very easy to understand way. So totally worth it to watch. You can expect your chakras align at the end of this conversation, your kundalini rising, a higher perception of reality. There is so much love involved in the creation of this content. I hope you enjoy. The conversation is here.
Finally.
Yeah,
Make it
finally we make it happen here in Bali with Vishuddha Das. I have been following your content, your videos. We talked already about this a little bit for a while, and I really appreciate what you're doing. Vishuddha is a spiritual teacher, is a YouTuber as well, is an author, and I personally have been teaching yoga philosophy for a while.
Beautiful.
And I studying Buddhist philosophy, Stoic philosophy, Tantric philosophy, because I'm just mind blown by the path of jnana, of the knowledge, right?
Yes.
And I found in your content something that I couldn't find before, something like real deep teachings, but in a very easygoing, chill way to express it, and this is very valuable. I think this is one of the reasons that you have many followers, that people want this, people want truth, people want no shit stuff and real deal things, and I really appreciate that. So for people who doesn't know you, how would you introduce yourself? How would you explain what you do and who you are? Not really in the Vedanta deep sense of meaning of who you are.
I mean, we could go really deep on that. But I guess at the surface level, if we're going to talk about the role and everything, I've been on my own spiritual path for about 8 years now. And so I share that path, what I learn and what I study. And through that, what I teach on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/VishuddhaDas. I've written 2 books. The first book is kind of about my life path, dealing with drug addiction, the fact that I spent a year in jail, going through a lot of the trials and tribulations that a lot of us face in life, and what I used to kind of not escape that, but grow out of that way of living and thinking. And then the second book is called The Meditation Manual. It's about meditation, point blank, which meditation methods might work for you, how to implement them, and how to understand meditative philosophy at a really simple level. And I'm glad you said that, because that's pretty much the entire aim of what I do, is just to try to take these sometimes complex philosophies or ideas and make them simple so that once you have a little taste of it, you can do your own seeking. Because that's the hardest part, is getting into it or starting to, at first, understand these things. And then, because once you get a little bit of it down, or you kind of understand it, then you can do all of the research in the world and go about finding out what works best for you. I like how you just said you're into Stoicism as well. I just did a video on Stoicism
I
a few weeks
watched it.
ago.
Yeah, it's really great.
I love Stoic philosophy.
Some people say like Stoic philosophy is like grounded Buddhism.
Yeah.
It's like Buddhism without the monks flying in the Dhammapada or whatever, but it's based on logic and makes sense
Very
for many
much.
people.
Logic and reasoning is massive.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that is important for the concept of the teacher or the master or the guru, and I want to know about your thoughts about that. You consider yourself as a spiritual educator, a spiritual teacher.
Yeah.
It's something that I personally have been struggling as well on how to frame what I do.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Do you think is highly necessary that everyone needs to find one teacher, one guru, or in different ways in order to move forward in the process of awakening, on growth, on deal with traumatic experience, on healing? What do you think about is the role of the teacher?
Well, there's a famous quote that I always try to reference, and it's that the teacher and the taught together create the teaching. So there's no teaching without somebody understanding what's being provided. So that's why clarity is important. Understand, like in Vedanta, at the temple where I study, throughout his lectures, which is something I haven't seen very often, but with my Swami, you can raise your hand and ask a question in the middle of what he's presenting because he wants you to be able to understand it. So for me, it's big to do that too, is to have an understanding, to be able to ask questions, to be able to really try to break things down through rationale, through logic, through reasoning. Because if you're going to have faith in something and move forward, you have to be able to understand it and fully want to devote yourself to it. As for the idea of like needing a singular guru or something, I definitely think it's not 100% necessary, but I try to tell people it's like when you're in college and you're learning chemistry or like an intense science, right? If you're going to study to be a cardiovascular surgeon, you're going to want to study underneath a really renowned, really informative, really studied themselves teacher or professor who understands that component, who can teach it to you, explain it to you, walk you through it. It just helps. And that's how I kind of see my Swami, and the idea of Guru Kripa, or the path of the guru at all, is just that they are souls who are here to assist us. You don't have to work with one or find one, but if you can and they resonate with you on a really deep internal level, it does wonders for your own path and practice, because you're seeing true compassion and true practice in action, which sometimes can be hard to come by in this world. We're so often surrounded by what we view to be egotism and defensiveness. We're so used to wondering, what does this person want from me, or what can I get from them? So when you're around people or souls that don't have any of those inhibitions, that are really only there to assist and to help you grow and to help you deepen your own path, you're able to kind of like relax your shoulders and let go a little bit and just dive into your own path and practice and mirror a lot of those really intense and beautiful emotions.
I always have these discussions sometimes with some people or students about the message and the messenger. And I'm also interested in your appreciation of that, because the other day I was reading Osho and I quote Osho in one of the classes. And then one of the students say, but Osho, have been creating all this mess, so I don't follow him because of this figure. But and we have very beautiful, powerful discussion about the difference between messenger and message. And one of the things that I was saying, I remember that I was asking you, do you like Hitler? Of course not, I hate Hitler. Well, what if I tell you that I read the Hitler's book,
Mein Kampf,
and then I take a quote, it's like 2 lines of the book, which say like, I think life is super nice and it's important to live life, whatever.
Exactly.
And what if I cut that and I put it in the toilet,
and then you didn't know?
You didn't know, and change your life, and you say, man, thanks for that quote. Who wrote it? Hitler. So then what about that trade-off between messenger and message? What do you think about that?
I think that's definitely something that can occur to a lot of people. I agree with Osho, the whole idea of so same thing with me, is I've read a couple of Osho's books. They're phenomenal teachings. Like, he really was, when he was writing these books, in his practice. Now, depending on where that went in his later life is up for debate, But that's the thing is you don't have to synonymize the two things. You can learn a lot from people and not have to personally support their journey in the process, right? You can read Osho's books and not support poisoning water systems in a little town in, I think it was Colorado, I forget, Oregon, whatever state it was. So they're two separate things. They don't have to be intertwined unless you force them to be intertwined. Alan Watts, would talk about this at times. Alan Watts would go, "You don't know Alan Watts, because I don't know Alan Watts. You can have a perception of me and an image of me that you decide is what I am, but that's all I am based on what you're learning about me from my lectures or my books. You don't know me. I just am this complicated, renowned, radical soul doing my thing, and that's what we're all doing. So I think it's a little, it's definitely, I think, a more something somebody does when they're newer to the path is judge the teacher and deny true teachings just based on the missteps or misgivings of that teacher or what words they're learning from. And that's one of the things that I respect about Watts is Watts had multiple wives. He admitted his drinking issues. He smoked tobacco. That was his thing, and he didn't care, and he didn't shy away from it. So if those things negate you from learning about these really amazing philosophies and ideas, that's part of your karma at this moment in time. But I think the deeper you go, the more you realize those two things are not mutually dependent on one another. They can be completely separate, and you can learn from them as such.
And accepting the fact that we are humans as well, and teachers are humans,
exactly.
they're not like really awakening angels or something.
And that's the big thing I try to convey is like, I'm still a student myself. I may be teaching, but I'm also learning and growing and making achievements, making mistakes. It's part of the human experience.
I guess one of the main points is like, you cannot just drop all the teachings of a teacher because of like Osho bought a Rolls Royce or whatever.
Exactly.
It's like if there's some teachings that can change your life, is you can keep it. And I don't know, I personally prioritize the message most of the time than the messenger.
Exactly. And it's like you said, if you didn't know who provided that message, right? If you just read a book and Osho's name wasn't on it, you wouldn't have you would stop yourself from skewing the book in a negative light, which is what can happen with excess information, definitely.
So, for example, in your case, you call yourself a spiritual educator and spiritual teacher. And I wanted to know, what was the shift, when was the shift, what's happened that you were like the seeker, the guy exploring, the guy meditating, the guy in ashram, until now my purpose, my dharma, my mission is to communicate, is to share, is to teach. What's happened? And actually, and the other question is, what makes you a spiritual teacher?
Yeah, see, that was one of my big dilemmas when I was on my path after a few years. Is like, what do I consider myself? I'm creating these videos, I'm writing these books. What do I say? How do I word what I am? Especially when you're using, everyone's on apps like Instagram and YouTube and Twitter, right? How do I convey what I am in literally 2 sentences? So for me, it's all about condensing it to the easiest thing, right? I'm still a seeker. I'm seeking and learning every single day. But the majority of what I do, how I make a living, and my dharma on this earth is to share information and help others understand that information. So by default, that is teaching. Since the subject of what I'm teaching is spirituality, for me it was just 2 + 2 = 4. If those things go together, then spiritual teacher is what I am. Not dependent on my ego or anything like that, but that's just what I'm doing.
Yeah.
If people, some people can read that and they go, "Oh, you're showing your ego. You think you're a spiritual teacher." It's like, well, no, I'm just trying to express what I'm trying to do here is teach spiritual philosophies and ideas.
You need to frame it in some way if you want to operate good in this way.
You have to frame something. You know what I mean? You can't just You can walk around saying, "Oh, none of us exist and we're all just source." And these atoms floating around in matter forms.
Floating in the cosmos.
Yeah, but if we're going to be specific and help people understand specific things, we have to express ourselves in specific ways, So that for me was just the reason why I decided to write it that way or frame it that way. And that's how anyone has to do it. There's really no other option to it. A dentist has to say he's a dentist if he's fixing teeth. It's kind of just a simple thing for me. That's how you got to do it.
And especially in your case, I guess that you're quite young to be a spiritual teacher. I don't know, like whatever. I mean, the norm would say that you are an old, long-bearded dude from the Himalayas giving the teachings. And how old are you? 26? 26, right?
Yeah, just turned 26.
And I guess you have been, I don't know, because I personally am receiving as well comments like that, It's like for classes that people with like in the 50s, 60s, 70s coming to your classes and learning from a little boy,
Yeah, well, the thing is, too, is people don't realize is just because you're a certain age doesn't mean you haven't been on your path for quite a long time. For me, it's 8 years running, so at 28, I'll have a decade of practice, which usually for a lot of people doesn't happen till later in their life. That's just life. Some people have the chaos and trauma of life happen young and they awaken, and some people don't have those revelations till their mid-40s. I mean, Ram Dass didn't become a quote-unquote spiritual teacher until he was in his mid-40s, almost 50s, because that's just where his path was at the time. So I think it's going to be something we even see moving forward as younger teachers than us, like young 20s, really, really young, that have these philosophies because now they have access to the internet and this information so prevalent. We're just kind of the first generation, I feel, of young teachers, quote unquote, because we're the first generation to really have a lot of access to this information on Google, online, researching Wikipedia, finding all these places we can go and study. It's just a turning of the tides, a changing of the guard in regards to what a spiritual teacher can and can't be. And for me, it was also important not to shy away from that. Not to like let my age be a limiting factor as to what I could or couldn't be, and where I could or couldn't go.
It's a limiting belief, thinking like you need to have a specific age to be a teacher. I mean, I get deep teachings from my little, like cousins or whatever. Like a dog could teach you, an animal could teach you. Everyone can be a teacher,
Exactly.
So
yeah, and that's the big thing I see too. So for me, people, I teach meditation. I've written books on it. I teach these philosophies, but I don't have any yoga alliance credits or anything like that. It's just, well, my practice has been in my temple with my Swami, and if that's not good enough, that's fine. Some people need these credits or these certifications or these 300-hour yoga teacher trainings to like put their faith into someone or a practice, and that just goes to show, we all have our paths. But for me, it's just being honest and sincere with what I am and what I do, and trying to make that known as I go forward and share information.
So we have been talking about spiritual teachers, spiritual teaching. The concept of spirituality is an interesting concept for me. It's because, well, I live in Ubud, and the spirituality and the spiritual thing and the spirituality here and there is very present. And I have been actually asking friends about what spirituality means for you, and it's very interesting, different answers. So talking about if you are a spiritual educator, you're a spiritual teacher, what is spirituality? How would you define the concept of spirituality?
To me, I see spirituality or spiritual work as any effort you put into your own awareness, both external and internal, to help you expand your perception of reality and the importance of what matters and what needs to be done beyond just the ego roles that we've been taught growing up. So any work, I think, that allows you to expand your nature into the realm of other people, other places, opening up to new things, reverting from like sexism, racism, all these things, recognizing the unified essence of all of us, working together, expanding what matters to being just not me, but my community, people around me, ways I can help, ways I can serve, ways I can surrender. Anything that allows you to expand the essence of what you think you are, to be more inclusive of everything and everyone, is spirituality to me. That's how I've always tried to remember it.
Do you think that this question comes to my mind? Do you think everyone is consciously or unconsciously in the path of doing things, saying things, and engaging in actions to expand the level of perception of reality? Because you can be very conscious about it. I mean, I'm in my spiritual journey, and I'm going to India, and I go to Vipassana, and I'm doing my yoga, and you are like reading Alan Watts or whatever. But sometimes I think that, anyway, if you work as a marketing manager in New York, which is like nothing to do with the example that I gave, somehow, and one of my hypotheses that the other was, I was thinking about that, somehow anyway, life is pushing everyone somehow towards a higher level of awakening, to move closer to love, to move closer to your essence. What do you think about that? That everyone is in the path?
Everyone's on their path, whether or not they're aware of it. That's one thing that karma is expressed as in Vedantic philosophy, is that it's the nature of where your essence as source is going, how long it will take for it to realize its own truth. So that's the thing, is that some of us can be fully into our path. There's some people who are sadhus living in caves in India for 40 plus years, just intensely awakening and releasing themselves from bondage and recognizing truth. And they're just as much on the path as, like you said, a marketing executive up in a penthouse in New York City. Where we are on our path is the way we perceive it differently, right? And we come and go in different incarnations depending on what you believe. But regardless, we're on our path. Now, whether or not we're making leaps and bounds on that path in each incarnation or in our lifetime is a different story.
Sure.
Right? And that's part of the thing they say is like, what happens in this lifetime is your karma for what you need to learn and realize. So some people, again, grow massively and awaken completely. Other people don't really grow at all, but they grow a little bit, and that's how incarnations work, and that's how the flow of life works energetically. It's always trying to remember what it is, right? It's always coming to a point.
Do you think it can happen the opposite? That you say some people grow a lot, some people grow a little, and some people just don't grow?
Yeah, it can revert. That's what the thing is, like, it goes back and forth, and that's one of the big teachings in Vedantic philosophy, is that you're not here to force this information on anyone. You're here to provide it to those who are ready to listen. So it's not a thing in Vedantic philosophy. I tell people, especially with like Hindu philosophies, you don't see Hindu street preachers. They're not out there trying to like, praise Krishna, you need to know this, you have to, do you understand Shiva's word? They don't do that, because it's not, that's interrupting someone else's karma,
Exactly.
And you can't force people into this understanding, but you can express it in your own way and talk about it and then let them grow.
What about, you say, okay, so spiritual teachers in your traditions, they don't go around on the streets preaching, but how do you interact with, if you interact with just friends,
Mhm.
family versus your tribe here?
Good
People that
question.
interview you. Do you give certain information as in preaching, or do you completely let that go?
That's the thing. So there's a fine line, I think, between preaching, basically just like sitting people down and saying, listen, you need to listen to what I have to say.
Yeah.
This is
You
how it
should
works.
do this.
Yeah, instead of telling people what they should do, providing options based in your practice. So in our practice, it's I'm teaching these different things and I can give people advice, but I'm not telling them that this is the way it has to be, or this is the only way, or this is what must happen. It's more so saying this is what I believe, this is what I think, this is what I do, this is what works for me, these religions, these ancient practices. If it serves you, so be it. If not, that's okay too. So that's kind of how you go about it. Is I notice a lot of people too with families. They go, I can't. My family doesn't understand me. I can't make them understand my spiritual path. And it's like that's not the point. You're not here to get validation from your family. All you can do is embody your path so truly that they start to realize its legitimacy, and then they'll understand you. But they're never going to understand you by going, understand me. You have to understand me.
Exactly.
It just
And when
doesn't
you're
work
a
that
kid,
way.
when your teachers or your mother do that, you're like, hey.
Yeah, exactly.
Fly.
So it's better to just live your practice fully, embody what you believe in, and people who resonate towards that will magnetize towards that, and people who don't won't. And that's life with everything. You can have any kind of hobby or enjoyment or practice, and people will either be drawn to it or pushed away from it. And that's just the nature of the play of and the pull and play of human life.
Makes me remember in the Patanjali in the sutras when he described the levels of the mind. He said, as a teacher, if some people with the dual mind or the more kind of low level of the mind, you cannot just go there and impose as a teacher like spiritual knowledge, but those only who are ready, the curious one, who's like,
exactly,
what the hell is going on, and they come to you, and then eventually, if you are in the role of a teacher, of course, then there's some sharings, or you in that process of curiosity, you go there. Otherwise. Yeah. And it's happened to me that a lot that in the teacher trainings that I'm teaching, like people say, oh, I can share all this amazing concept to all the people. And people will say this is crap, this is not real, and say, well, don't force anything.
Exactly.
You don't need to. I mean, let that inspiration change yourself, and that glow that will come out, it will inspire others to eventually change.
So that's the whole difference between the Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism. Is one school was like, look, you got to go out and like show these people how you change, and the other people go, no, you just live it so fully that it makes them react to it, and then they'll change by virtue of just being around it or seeing it. So that's how actually the initial two schools of Buddhism kind of separated, was because of those differences in views. But the way I see it is it's kind of like if you are like a marathon runner. You can try as hard as you want. You can go to every like bar in the city, and you can ask all the chain smokers, come run a marathon with me, and they'll all say no because they're not in the place to do it. They can't physically do it. But if you go to like a gym or something, or a place people are ready for it, and you go, anyone want to join me? You'll have tons of people that go, yeah, let's do it. So it comes down to that thing, especially, is just understanding who you're around, who's there, and letting people who gravitate towards it do so, and not worrying so much about those who can't or won't.
There is an interesting concept that I'm very touched and very connected, and also inspire somehow, something that inspired me a lot and is part of my message as well, which is authenticity, and which is aligned with the truth as well. And the concept of truth is that philosophical concept, it's like the main philosophical concept, the seek of truth, who I am. That's of your videos, like the most important question that you can ask: who am I, right? And the main important question of Ramana Maharaji and from Vedanta. So it's about who I am, what is my truth, why I'm here. And for me, this is, and I want to know your thoughts about it. This is in a very grounding level, and this realm is about your authenticity. It's like how you express, how you interact with the world. What would be your definition and your view on authenticity from the spiritual perspective?
That's a really good question. You mean in like the modern world?
In the modern world, yeah.
In the modern world. Because in the past, I'd say Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna was an Indian saint. We can get into that if we want. But in the modern world, I would say Ram Dass is one of the first people to really embody that. As a Harvard professor turned spiritual educator who did not shy away from his progressive views on psychedelics and the use of medicines and compounds. He was way ahead of his time, I think, in doing that in the 60s especially, and really bringing in these true practices. Modern teachers, I would say...
Or from your own perspective.
Yeah. For me, it's most of my teachers are dead, are like really old, from the 1800s in India. Maharaji too. But see, Ramakrishna was an Indian saint. My main teacher in the Vedantic lineage, which I study, is Ramakrishna. And so he was a Bhakta, and he was a devotee of Mother Kali. And he was a really big embodiment and representation, to me, of authenticity. So for him, he saw God through Mother, as Mother in everything. He's the divine feminine in everything. So like all the time, he would dress up in women's clothes. And this is 1800s India, very classical, very much in the caste system, would dress up in women's clothes and put makeup on and try to like dance as mother to embody her and really love her. He would climb trees like a little kid into his like 30s all the time, sit up there, lay on the ground. And if he didn't feel God, he would kind of like lay and cry and wait for her to come. He just didn't act any certain way to be any certain thing. He just lived authentically as he could, to bring that divinity into his life 24/7, and he never shied away from it. And he was one of the first teachers to say, I mean, this is mid 1800s. He was in that time already saying that all religions are correct, that they're all on the same path, that every single one is valid. So he wasn't in any way trying to, portray what he viewed to be true as the truth or the only truth. He was saying, look, these are all paths to awakening into divinity. They're all right. None of them are wrong. None of them are better than the other. They're all equal paths. So one of his things he would say as a metaphor was kind of, if there's like a door on the second floor of a building that leads you to awakening, the door to awakening, right? Yeah. You can climb up the wall, or you can take the stairs, you can climb a rope, or you can use a ladder. They're all valid methods to that, getting to that door. So every path is as well. And so for me, it was great seeing, his practice so long ago, just being so true to his path, no matter what anyone might have thought of him. To a lot of people in that time, he was absolutely crazy, like almost batshit insane, because he was so otherworldly, but he was just being himself fully and being with God fully. And that's one of the reasons I feel really drawn to Lord Ram, because Lord Ram in the Hindu pantheon is an incarnation of Vishnu, and he represents, like you said, authenticity, but the other word is virtue, just being yourself as best you can, because it's the best you can. And it's not easy to do, so it takes practice and work, and that's why it's so inspiring for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a great story. I think, and this is aligned with the concept of true, right? And there is Satya, right, from the yoga perspective. Yeah. So do you think there is like the one main truth that is like the one objective truth? The other day I was talking with a coach who was saying, but there is like true, like gravity, that if I put this, it's gonna fall. That's true. That is a fact. And then there is true that from your perception on how you are seeing and perceiving the world, right? Like the avidya from the yoga, like the wrong perception because of your samskaras, your patterns, and so on. So we can be seeing the same picture, but we can be seeing and experiencing different things that will lead us to react in different ways. So what about that different? You acknowledge that is one like subjective truth depending of your perception, and one main ultimate truth, which could be, I don't know, the Brahman or something.
The Brahman, yeah. So I was going to say, the way you're asking the question, the answers in the question, is there one truth? The one is the truth. One is truth. So and what Maharaj would often say to Ram Dass is he would hold his finger up and he goes sub-ek. Sub-ek. And sub-ek means all one in Hindi. All one. He would always say all one, all one, all one. And so that's the teaching. That's the penultimate philosophy of Vedanta. It's what shows in every other religion at the deepest level philosophically, is that nature of oneness. But in English, it's hard to express non-duality or Advaita, because oneness, in the way we use language, implies two. So if I say oneness, your brain can automatically go, but what about duality? Yeah. So oneness is a bad word. There's like no English equivalent to Advaita. It's just pure beingness. So I like to say that it's allness. Just allness is reality. There is no other truth. Every other truth is a mind-created truth. It's a mentally infiltrated truth based on perceptions and linguistics. But that oneness is the pure pentiment truth, because since it's one of those, it's hard to wrap your brain around, but it's almost like a paradox. Since there is existence, there cannot be non-existence. Existence is, and that's Advaita at the core. A famous saying, one of the four Mahavakyas, is Tattvamasi. So it means thou art that. So you are that. And by that, it doesn't mean you are just you, me, or her, or the other people around us, or people in Bali, or people around the world. It's like that you are that, all of it. You are all.
So allness / oneness would be the ultimate truth, and what they reserve. They talk about the Brahman in Hindu philosophy.
Yeah, and Brahman literally represents allness. So all the Hindu pantheon, the Trimurti, it all comes out of Brahman. Exactly. It's a manifestation of Brahman, so to speak. That allness.
That's interesting, because the mind would never understand that, right?
And that's the thing. It's an experiential truth.
It's an experiential truth.
It's not a truth. You can come to that realization with logic and rationale. That's the whole point of Jnana Yoga, is that like intellectual, like getting to a point where you can almost kind of be like, oh, I get it, one. But then you have to dive into the path and really feel it. So my Swami would always say that, he'll have a really deep esoteric saying come up in the video or in his lecture. Yeah. And he'll be like, he'll kind of like mock himself and like throw you out and maybe like, why did you do that? And he'll be like, look, me saying we're all one and tat tvamasi and thou art that. That's all fine and dandy, but until you feel that truth, it's just words. All one is just words until you are all one, and then you kind of get a little glimpse.
One of my philosophy teachers in Rishikesh, he say, man, you are everything. And I was like, oh, thanks, teacher. But also you're nothing.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? You're so good, but also you're so bad.
Yeah.
It's like the opposites. And it was like, what the hell he's talking about?
And that's the funniness about wording in Buddhism versus Hinduism is Buddhism says emptiness.
Yeah.
Hinduism says fullness. But they mean the same thing. So that's the paradox of the philosophy is they mean the same thing by empty and full.
We need to merge Buddhism and Hinduism and then become everything and nothingness at the same time.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah, because, exactly. Beyond the mind, if we're talking about allness or oneness, if you say that's everything, is not fair that not include nothingness in the everything, which is paradoxical.
Exactly. So it puts the mind in a feedback loop to try to just understand it without embodying it. So that's why it's so important to merge practice with philosophy.
Yeah. Which is still useful, hacking the mind, and the mind's like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
And in the experience, like the realization that this is real.
Yeah. It's one of those things like you understand it when you stop trying to understand it.
Yeah.
In that moment of pure effortlessness is when you understand it. So you can't like be like, I'm gonna get it today. It'll never come that way.
Yeah, I remember. Well, Alan Watts was talking about this, and the other day I sent you a video about Michio Kaku, one of the scientific.
I've read his books,
and he was saying, well, the last research, and it was like a couple of years ago. The last research is saying that the universe shouldn't exist, and he explained that in the news, and it was like, but what is that? Yeah, because we are studying matter and antimatter and the laws of the universe, and basically we shouldn't be here. So basically, the truth was a paradox that makes you remember when Alan Watts was saying that the most deepest truth of the universe are paradoxical.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was saying, wow, Michio Kaku and all these scientific guys are kind of like, this is a mistake, but eventually getting there.
Yeah, and Zen Buddhism has been using something called koans. Have you heard of koans?
Yeah, the koans.
Koans are kind of paradoxical sayings in Buddhism that are literally meant to break your brain. Like, because they exist to show you that the mind can't know or understand everything. That a perfectly natural question can be asked, and it just shuts down your ability to understand it. You can't answer it. So it's like one of the references I use is like I ask people, what's north of the North Pole?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things like you can ask a question and with a sentence structure it makes sense, but there's no logical answer to that.
So now we have been talking about the theory of the truth and so on, but you were mentioning that this is meant to be experienced.
Yeah.
So how? That's the question. If people watching this is like, okay, this sounds cool, I want to experience that.
Yeah.
What eventually they need to do, what space they need to create, what people they need to talk, what they need to watch, what they need to whatever to get there. What would you recommend or say to them?
And that's the beauty of human life is that all of our paths to awaken to these truths come in different forms. So for me, I wouldn't tell anyone to do any specific thing the way I do it because my path came to by virtue of me living authentically in my own way. And that's just the way it goes. The best thing I can say, and what Vedanta says, is look, just ask questions, do research, look for places that work for you to help you awaken to this truth. My Swami will say, to people that are new to the temple, it just doesn't make sense. Like, you're not hurting anyone's feelings by looking elsewhere. Don't make yourself feel like you have to do this because this is how other people do it, right? So he'll say, like, if you don't get it, you don't have to be here. Not in a mean way, just like, seriously, find out where it works for you. And that's what I say in my book on meditation, too, is there's a lot of different methods of meditation. Try them on for size. It's like picking out a pair of shoes. You might try on a few pairs and they kind of fit, and then you get that third pair and you're like, oh, this shoe's perfect, and it fits perfectly. So that's what spiritual practice is, too, and finding your path and what practices work is just doing your own research, trying different things out, visiting different places, and seeing what connects with you. And then once you truly feel at the deepest level, this is the path that functions for me and truly serves my best, you commit your time to that. And that's the big thing, is really committing to it. And that's hard for me at times too, especially traveling. It's hard to commit to your path, but that commitment is what separates you and truly being a seeker and diving into these truths versus just somebody who might read about them or hear about them in a whisper or a conversation.
This is super interesting and something very present the last probably 5 years of my life about the path, about which path to follow. Yeah. So, for example, I have done a few Vipassanas, and one of them is just blew my mind, the experience and the teaching with the teacher.
Yeah.
And then I say, okay, I just want to do the this tradition of meditation, of Buddhist meditation. I just want to do this because here's everything. And then I swap into the tantric practice and philosophy, and the
Tantra's
traditional
very non-dual
tantra
as well.
is very non-dual as well. And it was like, yeah, it does make sense. But then, and then I was asking questions of tantra to my Buddhist teacher. At the very traditional, he studied with Uva King and from the like Goenka lineage as well. And he was like, yeah, I don't know. I will. He didn't have answers to specific things that I was like very specific philosophical questions about Hindu philosophy. I said, no, I mean, Anapanasati, Vipassana, Anicca, and practice, man. And I was like, all right. So then this is still very present for me, and as I noticed, as you say, also for you, which is sometimes like there is a fear of missing out. Of some path.
That's due to all this information we have in this era is like, but I can do this path and this path. What about this one? And it's like, look, you can like all those things, but if you really want to evolve and grow, you have to dedicate to one. Same thing with getting a doctorate or a PhD. At some point, after your first couple of semesters in college, you got to pick a major. And then if you really want to get to a point in that major, you have to follow it and go to a doctorate school and do all these different things to really put yourself in that space. You know, somebody who becomes a lawyer or a doctor isn't better than anyone else. They just dedicated a lot of time and effort to one specific path and practice. And that's all there is to it, you know, and that's what it comes down to, is finding the one that works for you. So a lot of them can make sense, but if you really want to dive into it, you got to kind of pick one almost and really let it work for you. And if it doesn't, the good thing about life is you got as much time as you got. So if you're on a path for a few years and you're like, nah, it still doesn't fit, you go to another one. You find something else, you know? There's always chance for change.
It would be like being explorer and try different things and really listening the calling and so on and trying. And then when you find something that you say like, oh, this suits me amazing, just commit to it. I think the tricky question, at least in my case, is like, okay, but what is the timing that I should choose one? You know, I couldn't tell. I have been choosing, but then I have been swapping anyway. So I feel like what is the time? I mean, I feel like, wow, this resonates so much. It is the time to commit to it and completely forget about anything else and be in my PhD of whatever or not. I think that timing is very tricky, and really we need to be connected with this and aligned to the whispers of the universe, I guess. Right?
It's you know, it's an interesting thing, but I mean, the cool part about it is that the core of all these philosophies are the same, right? Being in a space of pure awareness of the oneness of all things, and doing that by virtue brings out ananda, the blissful nature of what you are. So that is always going to be an underlying aspect. It's just about finding, you know, the technicals that work for you. So for me, I didn't know what Vedanta or Advaita Vedanta was at all before I visited my temple. It's just I was practicing Buddhist philosophy for a few years, and then I started reading the Bhagavad Gita, and that's the most revolutionary book I've ever read. It was absolutely transcendentally life-changing experience to read that, and I read it a lot now. But then when I went to the temple, I was just looking for places to study, and I walked into a world that just fit perfectly. It's like I felt like a puzzle piece that just dropped into its spot, and I was like, oh, this is what it feels like. So I think that's something that can occur to anyone, is through that seeking, through that growing and evolving, you find that space where you fit perfectly, and you can embody your practice through it. Yeah,
that's really interesting, and you know, it's really present.
Yeah, it's the same teaching as the Buddha saying, you know, don't believe what I'm saying just because I say it. Believe what I'm saying because after trying to break it down and negate it and argue it, the truth still stands. So Vedanta is the same way. It's the same thing. You shouldn't just practice Vedanta or understand Advaita because it sounds great and like, oh yeah, oneness sounds good. Like, it should be something that you feel at the core of your being by virtue of doing the research and being rational and being logical and still coming to that conclusion. Like, the way they express it is that when you find your path, there's no doubt. It's kind of like when you're doing math, right? You writing 2 + 2 = 4, writing 2 + 2 = 4 on a piece of paper, you're not like, does it? You know, there's no question in your mind. Sure. You're just like, yeah, it's 4. So like, your path is the same way. When it really resonates fully at the deepest level, there's no doubt. And that's what true faith is, that we see in the East versus the West, is that there's no doubt. In deep practice, there's zero doubt, because it's based on that logical and rational understanding mixing together while practicing.
Yeah, I used to have a teacher who say, he comes to his philosophy classes and he say, well, whatever I'm going to say, don't accept it, but don't reject it. Contemplate it.
Exactly. That's perfect.
It's just perfection.
Good teacher.
It helped me so much for me for the next teachers that I was visiting, and also as a recommendation when I was sharing from my stuff. You know, that makes sense.
So that's what my Swami does. So like, even after the lecture, he'll kind of be like, do you understand? You know, questions? Come on. Like, let's hear it. You know, because he wants you to question him. He wants you to try to. That's why he says, if it doesn't make sense, you feel like something I'm saying is like wrong, ask me. And then I can show you the answer, and then you can go, oh, and then continue, you know? And that's a problem I see with a lot of, that's what I try to do in my workshops, is like, I want to make it interactive. Because a lot of the times, if you disagree or something feels off or wrong in the middle of something, it ruins the entire rest of the experience because you can't voice what you're thinking or feeling. So, but if you can do that, if you're in a place where you can ask freely and question freely, it makes it a lot easier to be immersed in it and get into it and deal with problems as they arise.
The inquiring process.
Exactly, which is a fundamental aspect of the practice.
Which is sadly, though, the modern education system is very like just surrender and accepting whatever the teacher is saying. And I personally grow in that way, you know?
I got in a lot of trouble in school because of that.
Yeah, exactly.
I got expelled and I got detention
questioning everything.
all the time, because I would never take that as an answer. I guess I've always kind of been a little rebel. But you got to be a rascal to grow spiritually. I mean, a lot of the best spiritual teachers are rascals.
Yeah.
So I think that comes with authenticity, as being a little bit rascally.
It's true.
Being yourself.
It's true. It happened the same to me in the Catholic Church and with the priest and the church that I was grow with my family, especially in South America. That the Catholicism is very strong.
Yeah.
And I was that everything was a matter of faith, and you need to just believe that it's something there. And I was like, but I don't feel it. You know,
exactly.
I don't just convince me. And I was open to be convinced. I did like First Communion and confirmation. I did my confirmation of my faith when I was 18, and I was already a rebel and inquiring stuff. And I just want to be convinced, and I didn't. So and I wasn't. You know, I wasn't being convinced. That's why when I read like ancient tantric scriptures, for example, I think it's the Prajna Vishna Dayam, one of the tantric texts. They say like one of the first things that they say is like all these things meant to be experienced.
Yes.
And that makes sense, and it's aligned with what we have been talking.
And that's the biggest difference, I think, between Eastern and Western religions is it's not based on fear tactics. It's based on experience and like understanding, versus just like you said. That's how I felt. I was raised in Episcopal like Christian church, and it was the same way of like you just gotta believe it because it's the Word of God. And I was like, but that doesn't answer my questions. So. That's the problem. And that's why you see in a lot of those religions, you know, there's a lot less faith. And their faith is based on fear and like just being told to have faith rather than actually feeling it at the deepest level. And that was a big thing India taught me, is like these people have faith not because they're told to, but because they truly, in their heart of hearts, believe in this and have felt it and experienced it. And they're with God, truly, versus just like going through the motions of going to church every Sunday, you know.
Do you think like fear-based institutions, fear-based church, based on belief system and based on like, okay, if you do wrong, you go to hell and all this stuff, do you think they are like, in terms of followers, they are decreasing on time, and there's going to be a time soon, I guess, that it would just disappear?
Yeah, I think in time it has a potential. I mean, right now it's just got a lot of power to control a lot of people. It'll be, I think, pervasive as long as we subscribe to cultural sanctions and living in a certain way because our parents taught us to or told us to. A lot of the modern world, that's changing because we have access to new information. We realize the world's different outside of our house. Yeah. And most people in the past haven't. You know, they think the reality is what my parents tell me reality is, and they accept that. So now we're in a time where all of that has the potential to change greatly because we have the ability to see that just because I'm learning something from my parents doesn't mean it's absolute truth, and that I can find my own path and find what works for me and like branch out a bit, and that there's communities that accept me if I do so. You got to realize that even in the past too, fear was a big thing, excommunication, being like cast aside, having nowhere to go. There's all these different things, not just with religion, but with sexuality as well, things like that. We're in a place now where it's more progressive, and we have kind of resources to allow us to dive into what really matters and what truth can assist us.
So would you say that eventually the future, in terms of the future of religion, it's gonna get an end at some point soon, in terms of like religion and belief system? You need to follow it in that format.
In the fear-based format, I don't think it can last forever, but I think anyone based in truth and rational logical thinking can do much greater good and can last a lot longer. I think the problem with a lot of Western ideas is that they're really based on the teachers now versus these ancient teachings and practices, which are just kind of like, this is what I see the difference as, is that in Hindu philosophy, a lot of these teachings are just commentaries on these ancient truths. So the truths remain the same. Same thing with Stoic values, same stuff. These are the values, these are the truths. Comment on it how you will and like perceive it how you will. Whereas in other religions, it can be how they can change over time based on people. So the truth can be distorted based on personality and culture around it. Versus it just saying, look, this is the ultimate truth. Here are ultimate truths. And now let these other people kind of help you understand it better. That's a big difference, I think.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I really wanted to ask you about, we were talking about spirituality and the spiritual experience, that beyond the intellectualization of it. In your case, if you could mention one, or let's say two, about one of your most deepest transcendental, like awakening spiritual experience that you ever had. When, how, what did you do, how it was the process?
Yeah. The paradox, like you said, is that the deepest experiences, you feel like you can explain them not as well, because you're there.
We are getting in the paradox now, in the paradox vortex.
But I can reference to, I've had a lot of interesting experiences, but the first one that really was the most life changing for me was my first like astral projection, like out of body experience, because it really just destroyed my mental paradigms of what reality was. So I had a mental system, a box in my head that said this is what can be or is, and it has to be in here. And then my first projection just shattered that whole box, and I realized that reality and what truth was and what I could know extended far beyond what my brain could process. And so it was just a very humbling. I just I left my body, and then I came back to it. I just cried for like 20 minutes because I was so overwhelmed with like joy, like wow.
And the moment that you were out of the body, what did you experience? I mean, if you need to put some words on it.
Yeah, that was the crazy thing too. It was that when I was out of the body, it was almost like you were in a blueprint of reality, like looking at this dimension through a dimension sitting directly on top of it. So it would be like, imagine us sitting here right now in this little hut, except if I left my body, I'd be witnessing us sitting here in the hut, and we'd be different colors and hues and built kind of like a blueprint of this dimension, with just like, I don't know. It really, they do a pretty good job of kind of like representing it a little bit in Doctor Strange. Have you seen that?
Sure, yeah.
And she pushes him out of the body, and he can like see what's going on. It's kind of like that. For me, it was more like really everything was blue. Like it was blue and like almost like a blueprint of like a house being built, but a blueprint of reality, just witnessing it. And it was holographic and transparent.
This is what some ancient philosophers talking about, the observer, right? Or the Purusha.
Yeah. And there was no like me observing it. It was just like, oh, this is what's happening. And it wasn't like, there was no reaction while I was in the projection. I was just presently aware of everything that I was seeing and experiencing.
That could be like being awareness itself, and not really the subject.
Yeah,
it's like me, I am seeing, but the seeing itself.
Yeah, and that's how I feel. And the few projections I've had is that there's no like really the personality, the ego mind is part of this dimension, and that dimension is not really there. You're not judging the projection or like wanting it to be a certain way. You're just experiencing it and letting it happen as it does.
Did you create this space?
No, it creates itself. It's like self-fulfilling. It's intense.
But in terms of like you I don't know, it's like a ritual before something just happened to you in your dreams randomly without expecting.
No, I practiced to go in to have the astral projection.
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, I practiced. So there's like methods of practice. I have a few videos on my channel, but you can there's like wake back to bed method. There's a really good book, a trilogy by a man named Robert Monroe, Journeys Out of the Body. Yeah. And he talks all about his experiences in the astral realms, like how to invoke it. It's beautiful. Amazing. Powerful stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So now I feel like sharing with you, like I'm in this mission of documenting and sharing in different ways. I'm trying different formats of sharing my process of seeking for truth, and that leads me to yoga and philosophy and different practices. And what is in terms of this, in terms of people who may be watching this out of curiosity or listening this out of curiosity, and they're having their jobs and they're having I don't know, like a 9 to 6 job from Monday to Saturday, and not really happy and craving for Sunday, or craving for that 2 weeks on holiday, not really enjoying and embracing life to the deepest. I think there is a lot of people like that, and I was there, and I feel way more conscious creator of my reality than that. So my mission, and I really want to inspire that people eventually to take actions or through tools and stuff like that, and I know you're doing it as well. So for these people that may be listening, for these people that may feel a little bit of despair or anxiety, desires of experiencing something more deep, more real, but eventually fear holding them back, what words, what is your message for that people?
There's you might have heard of it. There's a Chinese proverb that goes, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So when it comes to like wanting more and desiring more, that would extend into spiritual life too. If you're wanting and desiring things outside of it, you're going to want and desire things in it. The only thing that can happen is you wanting to change the reality you're having, shifting it. And you have to put an effort on your end. So nothing we say, like in this video, we could spend 2 more hours talking about ways they could do it, and they could shut the video off and not do it.
Sure.
So there's nothing I can say that can convince you to change your life and change your path and enjoy this moment and meditate and dive into what matters to you, except for the fact that, look, you're not happy now, so something needs to change. That change can be internal or external, but work on ways to implement change and see what works for you.
So
but
first the willingness.
Yeah, you have to have the effort and willingness. Effort and willingness aren't things that can be taught. You have to internally decide to put in effort. No one can force you to go to the gym and get in shape. You have to decide to do that. Same thing internally. No one can force you to understand these philosophies and find peace in this moment, no matter how much chaos you're going through. Like I've got a really big thing that just happened in my life yesterday with a close friend of mine that's really, really upsetting, and it really hurts me, and it's really bad. But I'm still here, being present, trying to make the best of situations because my path has allowed me to do so. Whereas in the past, I might be a wreck and be sitting in my room drunk crying. So there's differences that come with the path, and they provide themselves fruits. You don't. The way I say it is that you practice the practice to practice the practice. You do it for the virtue of doing it because it assists you.
Not because you need to get there and you need to suffer in the process.
Yeah, you just do it because by doing it, your life changes and you grow and evolve and can adapt to many different things. And so if that feels like something that can help you and change your life and you don't want to be stressed or depressed anymore, try out new methods, research new things, but you have to put in the effort on your own end. And until you do that, nothing we say can convince you.
Willingness, effort, and commitment as well. Because the tools there are. I mean,
and admitting when you're not going to commit. Like for me, a big issue for me was when I started traveling, I have my little altar that I travel with. Yeah. And I put it on a little spot by itself, away from things. And I'm like, oh, this is my little altar space. But I get so caught up in doing stuff that like I wouldn't pray to my altar in the morning. I started getting mad at myself. I had to admit it. I'm not paying attention to my gurus or my teachers. Like I'm not doing my prayers or my japa. So now my altar is literally an inch away from my laptop and my notepad. So like when I wake up, I can't not see it or do my practice. So it's just having that admittance to go, okay, this is where I'm being lazy. This is where I'm having isures. Let me find a solution.
So you know what you need to do in your case.
Yeah,
and people eventually is the same.
Too. Yeah, I'm very self-aware of my issues, and like that's what helps you grow as you realize, dang, I got a lot of work to do here. But not being embarrassed or upset by it, but just going, look, I see it, I admit it, now let me do the work.
Okay, it's happened the same to me. It's like there is some work that I've been learning that I know is transformational, but then the mind gets distracted or whatever, and the commitment, as you mentioned, is super important. And we have the tools, we have the information like everywhere. Just your YouTube channel, like Vishuddha does, is like full of real deal, super amazing content. It's free, man. It's like people can have access.
That's the best part of the internet. And I have a video coming up soon on social media and spirituality. Is that like you can literally everything we're talking about in the past, where it might have taken traveling to different countries and finding all these esoteric truths, like you can just type it in on Google and find PDFs from India translated to English for free. All these different crazy esoteric
comments on Satchitananda, Google,
free. Everything's free online. Now you can invest your money into things in certain ways. That's another story. But a lot of the information, for starters especially, it's right there. There's no excuse except your own laziness, and you have to accept that at the beginning of it. I'm suffering because I haven't put in work to change my perception to cease my suffering. Yeah. So that's what the Buddha would say. You're suffering because you're not admitting that you're clinging to things. And as long as you cling to things, you're at fault for your suffering. No one's responsible for it but you. And no one's responsible for the change but you either.
Exactly. So guys, this is the thing, willingness and committing. There is like so much tools, so much wisdom over there, easy access, free, but requires some commitment. And I can talk to myself, it's like every time that I do that, I see myself closer to, we can call it love, we can call it your higher self, we can call it you without your limiting belief and patterns and samskara. There's something else. The infinite you. If you go deeper, if you peel that onion, right, with all these limitations and samskaras, then eventually you find everything or nothing,
right?
It's
like Shrek says, ogres are like onions, but so are we. So
exactly.
Life is like an onion, you just got to keep peeling it away.
That's the invitation. If you want to follow the content of Vishuddha, the Vishuddha Das in YouTube, Great, great content, 100% recommended. I don't know if you have last word to finish this amazing talk.
Ooh, I think this is a great talk. It's a lot of fun. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for being authentic to your own journey, being on your path. And thank you all, if you've stuck around for this whole video, to being authentic to your journey and on your path as well, to sit here and dedicate time to watching this and embracing it. And I wish you the best moving forward. Ram Ram.
See you next time.
That was perfect. That was beautiful.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.